Amara had always been the soft, quiet type. She was gentle, kind, and full of love. People often said she had the sweetest heart, but that didn't seem to matter much in a world where appearance came first. She had always been on the heavy side. From childhood, her weight followed her like a shadow. And no matter how hard she tried, it never went away. When she met Chuka, she thought her life had finally changed for good. Chuka was handsome, tall, and charming. He made her feel beautiful in ways no one ever had. Amara had doubts at first. Men like Chuka rarely looked at girls like her, but he was patient and kind, and when he asked her to marry him, she said yes with tears in her eyes. Their wedding day was a grand one. Friends and family danced and sang. Amara wore a beautiful white gown that fit her perfectly. She smiled all day. It was the happiest day of her life. But not long after the wedding, things started to change. At first, it was small things. Chuka stopped holding her hand in public. He no longer called her sweet names like my queen or my sunshine. When she asked what was wrong, he simply said he was tired. Soon the small things became bigger. He began staying out late, sometimes not returning home until the next day. Amara would wait at the door with food, praying nothing had happened to him. But he would walk past her without a word and go straight to bed. One evening, Amara found the courage to ask him, "Chuka, what's going on? Have I done something wrong?" He looked at her coldly. "I'm tired of pretending, Amara. Just look at you. You've added more weight since we got married. I can't stand it anymore." Her heart broke into pieces. "I thought you loved me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I thought I—" The doorbell rang. Chuka looked past her and smirked. "My boys are here. We're watching the match tonight." As she stepped aside for his friends to come in, she wiped her eyes and forced a smile. But what happened next would haunt her forever. As she brought drinks to the sitting room, trying to be the perfect hostess, one of Chuka's friends said jokingly, "Omo Chuka, this your madam go soon break chair oh. Na Real heavyweight champion." Everyone laughed, including Chuka. Then Chuka added with a smirk, "Why do you think I call her my fat elephant?" The laughter was louder now. Amara stood frozen. She dropped the tray. Glass shattered. Everyone went silent. Tears filled her eyes. She turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, and didn't stop walking. But what Chuka didn't know was that night, he'd set a fire in her that would burn down everything he thought he controlled. And he would live to regret it. The city of Udena, always alive with movement and music, had never looked more beautiful than on the day of Amara and Chuka's wedding. White flowers danced in the wind, traditional drummers lined the courtyard of the grand reception hall, and people from far and near gathered to celebrate what seemed like a fairy tale. Amara's gown was specially sewn by Madame Odiri, one of the most famous designers in the city. The lace hugged her curves gracefully, the pearls on her veil catching the sun like magic dust. Her smile was bright, full of dreams, full of hope. Chuka stood at the altar in a wine-colored agbada, polished to perfection. He looked proud. Proud of his bride. Proud of the applause. Proud of the day. They danced, they laughed. People clapped and sprayed money. Cameras flashed like fireworks. At one point, even Amara's stern father had tears in his eyes. For once, he saw his daughter happy. Truly happy. But it was during the family introduction, when the couple went from table to table greeting relatives and elders, that something happened. Something small. Something that clung to Amara's mind like a whisper she couldn't shake. Chuka's mother, Mama Ifeoma, had been warm all day. She had smiled during the ceremony, even hugged Amara publicly, a rare sign of approval from her. But as Amara leaned down to serve her more rice at the high table, Mama Ifeoma touched her hand and said quietly, "Nne, always make sure you give him what he likes. Oh, men like my son, they don't settle for less for too long." Amara froze. She looked up. Their eyes met. Mama Ifeoma smiled politely, but her words hung in the air between them like thick smoke. Amara didn't know what she meant exactly, but the unease had already slipped under her skin. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the cleaners were mopping the decorated hall, Amara sat alone in the bridal suite. Her shoes were off, and she was surrounded by leftover wrappers, makeup brushes, and gifts. She touched her wedding ring and whispered, "He chose me." But somewhere deep inside her chest, doubt stirred. Their honeymoon in Obudu was short but sweet. Chuka had arranged for a private lodge overlooking the mountains. They sipped wine, took photos by the waterfalls, and Amara thought she could live in that week forever. He told her she was beautiful every night. He cooked breakfast twice. They took long walks and kissed under the stars. She told herself, "This is real. I deserve this love." But when they returned to Udena, life moved fast. Chuka resumed his banking job. Early mornings, late nights. He said he was working hard to build a future for them. Amara believed him. At first, she enjoyed setting up their small apartment. She added curtains, placed scented candles, and arranged framed photos from their honeymoon around the living room. She even started taking online cooking classes to surprise him with his favorite meals. But Chuka was changing. One day, she surprised him at his office during lunch. She had packed egusi soup with pounded yam, his favorite. But when she arrived, the receptionist looked surprised. "You're his wife?" the woman asked with raised brows. "Yes," Amara replied, heart racing. "He's at lunch already." Amara left the food and went home. That evening, he didn't even mention it. She asked if he liked the food. "I didn't eat it." "We had a team lunch," he said, casually removing his tie. "No thanks." No kiss. Not even a glance. She told herself not to overthink it. A week later, she noticed him scrolling through Instagram more often. He started following fitness models and influencers. Women who looked nothing like her. One day, as she reached out to cuddle him while watching a movie, he gently removed her arm. "Babe, it's hot." She nodded and turned her face to the wall, her heart heavy with the heat of rejection. Amara kept trying. She signed up for a local gym, even though she was too shy to work out in public. She bought new clothes, did her hair differently. But nothing worked. The sweet Chuka she married was fading. And then came the dinner party. It was meant to be a fun night, just Chuka and 3 of his friends from the university. Amara dressed up in a floral gown and made fried rice with peppered chicken and grilled fish. She served drinks and laughed at their jokes. She thought things were finally warming up again. But that night would rewrite her story. Chuka's friends laughed. He laughed too. And then came the cruel joke. "Why do you think I call her my fat elephant?" The word sliced through the air like a machete. Amara didn't remember dropping the tray. She didn't remember walking out the door barefoot. All she remembered was the laughter. And her heart, shattering into pieces she wasn't sure she'd ever be able to gather again.
The sound of laughter still echoed in Amara's ears long after the door shut behind her. She didn't know how she found herself on the road. Barefoot. Her head spinning. Tears threatening to fall but refusing to drop. It was dark, and the city's streetlights glowed like mocking eyes watching her shame unfold. "Why do you think I call her my fat elephant?" That sentence repeated in her head like a curse. She couldn't believe it. Chuka. The man who once held her like porcelain, the man who made her feel like the only woman in the world, had reduced her to a joke, in front of his friends. She reached a bus stop bench and sat down, her body trembling. Her gown was stained with oil from the tray she'd dropped. Her feet were sore from walking on the rough pavement. But none of it compared to the pain that sat like a stone in her chest. A Kiki driver slowed down beside her. "You dey go?" he asked. She shook her head. No. Where would she go? Her parents lived far, and even if they didn't, she couldn't bring herself to face her father, not after marrying the perfect man against everyone's warning. She couldn't go to a friend either. She barely had any left. Chuka had isolated her slowly, little by little. At the time, she hadn't even noticed. Now she was alone. Eventually, she stood and returned home just before dawn. The apartment was silent. Chuka was fast asleep, snoring lightly, as if nothing had happened. Amara stood over him for a long time, watching him. She used to feel love when she looked at him. Now? Just cold. She tiptoed into the guest room and locked the door. The next morning, the sun broke through the dusty blinds, casting pale yellow stripes across the floor. Amara got up early, bathed, and prepared her own breakfast without waiting for Chuka to ask. She didn't knock on his door. She didn't greet him. She didn't wait for him to leave for work. And when he finally did walk out with his usual loud cologne and suitcase, he paused at her door and knocked gently. Amara? Silence. He chuckled, low and lazy. Still angry? Babe, it was just a joke. Still silence. Don't act like you're new to jokes. You know the boys were just playing. She turned away from the door and faced the mirror. Her reflection looked tired. Weak. Forgotten. But beneath her tired eyes, a fire sparked. Just a flicker. Small but alive. That day, Amara went to the city market. She bought groceries but also something else, a small journal with a red leather cover. On the first page she wrote, "They laughed at me. They think I'll remain a joke. But today I begin again." She titled it Project Becoming. The days that followed were strange. Amara changed. Not for Chuka. Not for revenge. For herself. She stopped waiting by the door for him at night. She stopped preparing meals he never ate. She joined a local women's wellness group that met every Saturday at a center downtown. The women there were warm, bold, and loud. Many had faced betrayal, mockery, heartbreak. One woman, Cynthia, was a widow whose husband had married a second wife and thrown her out. Another, Esther, had left her job to raise a family, only to be called useless by her in-laws after her husband lost his job. They shared stories. They healed together. Amara was quiet at first. But each week she shared more. By the third week, she spoke about the dinner party. About the fat elephant comment. There was silence. Then Cynthia slammed the table. He said what? Chai. And you still let him sleep under the same roof, another said. Amara laughed for the first time in weeks. The real kind. That laughter stirred something inside her. She wasn't alone. At home, Chuka noticed the change. She was glowing. Confident. Distant. He came home one night and found she hadn't cooked. Amara, he said, you didn't make dinner. I already ate, she replied, not looking up from her book. Oh. You didn't ask if I was hungry. She blinked. You don't eat my food, remember? He blinked back. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, she said, standing. I'm going to bed. Don't forget to lock the door. She left him standing in the kitchen with confusion etched on his face. Amara wasn't done. She started small workouts at home. Nothing major, just YouTube dance videos and light jogging. She smiled more. Wrote more in her red journal. She even created a burner Instagram account to post quotes from her healing journey. Her favorite one. You laughed at me. Watch me become your silence. She posted it on a plain black background. She didn't tag him. She didn't have to. The universe would do the tagging. And then came the invite. A new women's networking event was happening in Udena, hosted by a local fashion house. Cynthia encouraged Amara to sign up. They're looking for everyday women to model confidence, not just clothes. Amara hesitated. Me? Model? Cynthia smiled. That man saw you as a joke. Let the city see the masterpiece. Amara looked at her reflection that night. The flicker in her chest had become a flame. She whispered to herself, he will live to regret it.
Amara stood in front of her wardrobe, her heart pounding like the beat of the city's night drums. She had been invited to model, not in a runway show or a magazine spread, but at a women's empowerment event themed, Beauty Beyond Numbers. At first, she had laughed when Cynthia handed her the flyer. Me. Model what, she had said, amused. But Cynthia didn't laugh. She just smiled and said, model power. Model healing. Model the courage that other women are still praying for. And now, here Amara was, 2 days away from the event, staring at herself in the mirror, holding a mustard yellow dress that hugged her hips and exposed her round arms. Once, she would have cried at the sight of her arms. Now, she simply adjusted the strap and said quietly, "This is me." The event took place at Prestige Hall in central Udena, a luxurious hotel space known for hosting celebrities and influencers. Amara had never stepped foot inside it, much less as a guest of honor. The morning of the event, she woke up at 5 a.m., her body buzzing with both fear and excitement. She bathed slowly, moisturized, applied subtle makeup, and wrapped her hair in a gold turban. When she stepped out of the apartment building, her neighbors looked twice. "Amara. You look, wow," one of them said. She smiled and nodded, feeling something new take root inside her. Not just confidence, but freedom. At the hall, the air was filled with perfume, soft music, and laughter. Tables were covered in white cloth, and pink rose petals decorated the walkways. Women of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds walked confidently, exchanging hugs and stories. Cynthia was already there, wearing a bright purple jumpsuit and high heels that made her look like royalty. "NN. Who is this queen approaching me?" she shouted, rushing toward Amara. Amara laughed and twirled in her dress. "You like? I don't like. I love. You look like a vision." The host, a plus-size beauty entrepreneur named Zikora, took the mic. "Today, we celebrate every woman who has ever been made to feel like too much or not enough. Today, we take our names back." Applause filled the hall. Later, when it was Amara's turn to speak on stage, she held the mic with trembling hands. "I never thought I'd be standing here," she began. "I used to look at mirrors and see shame. Now, I see strength." She paused. People nodded. "My husband once called me a fat elephant in front of his friends," she continued. "That moment almost crushed me. But instead, it cracked me open. And through that crack, the real me started to bloom." There was silence, then thunderous clapping. Some women wiped tears. Cynthia clapped the loudest. Cameras flashed. Amara's photo was taken more than 20 times in the next hour. Journalists from 2 lifestyle blogs asked for interviews. Zikora hugged her and whispered, "You don't even know the fire you just started." Amara smiled, her heart light, her shoulders relaxed. For once, she wasn't shrinking to fit into anyone's expectations. She was finally growing. But back at home, another fire was building. Chuka was scrolling through his Instagram feed when he saw something strange. A photo had been reposted by Udena Women Rising, a picture of his wife standing tall in a gold turban, smiling confidently, the caption reading, "Amara Chuka spoke today on healing after public body shaming by a partner." Her words broke the room. Her strength inspired everyone present. His jaw tightened. He zoomed into the picture. She looked different. Proud. Radiant. Like she didn't need anyone's permission anymore. He felt something twist in his stomach. Not guilt. Fear. Because he had mocked her. Abandoned her. Used her softness as a pillow and then tossed her away when it no longer comforted him. And now, the same woman he had once humiliated was becoming someone without him. Someone people wanted to listen to. He threw his phone onto the bed and paced. His pride and ego screamed at him to ignore it. But a small, uncomfortable truth had crept into his chest. He was losing her. Not physically. Emotionally. And nothing scared a selfish man more than a woman who no longer feared losing him. Meanwhile, Amara walked into her apartment with flowers from the event and a soft glow in her cheeks. She didn't expect to see Chuka sitting in the living room, phone in hand, eyes sharp. He stood up as soon as she entered. "Where were you?" he asked flatly. She looked at him and gently placed her flowers on the table. "Out." "With who?" She turned slowly to him and gave a small smile. "With people who see me." He swallowed. "You're becoming arrogant." "No," she said, removing her heels. I'm becoming visible. He laughed bitterly. So now you're a celebrity. She met his eyes. I don't have to be one. I just have to stop being invisible to myself. He stepped closer, a threat in his tone. Don't forget you're my wife. She raised an eyebrow. Are you sure you still see me that way? His lips parted. But no words came out. She walked past him, picked up her journal, and headed to the guest room, her room now. Before closing the door, she looked over her shoulder and said, by the way, someone from Udena TV wants to interview me next week. Maybe you'll finally see me on a screen instead of your jokes. Then she shut the door behind her. Amara sat in the makeup chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The studio lights above her glowed warm and bright, casting a gentle halo around her face. Across from her, a woman named Naza, the most popular morning show host in Udena, was looking at her notes and smiling. You ready? Naza asked, with a calm voice that made Amara feel safe. Amara nodded slowly, her heart beating like it wanted to escape her chest. As ready as I'll ever be. The interview had been arranged after her appearance at the Women's Empowerment event had gone viral. Her photo, standing tall in a gold turban, had been shared by influencers, activists, and even some politicians' wives. People began to ask, who is this woman who spoke so boldly about pain? And more importantly, who was the man who humiliated her in front of his friends? They didn't have to look far. Udena was small in heart, and word traveled fast. Many people already knew Chuka, the tall, handsome architect who often bragged about disciplining his wife at home. Now, people were beginning to whisper a new name, Amara. Not with pity. With respect. And today, the whispers would become loud voices. The cameras rolled. Welcome back to Morning Grace, Naza began, her voice smooth like honey. Today, we have with us a guest who has become a symbol of strength, healing, and quiet rebellion. Please welcome Amara Chuka. Applause rang in the studio. The few people in the audience clapped louder than usual. Some women stood. Amara smiled shyly, but her eyes were clear and bright. Thank you for joining us, Naza said. Thank you for having me, Amara replied, her voice soft but steady. They started with gentle questions. What did she do for work? How did she find strength through tough times? Then Naza gently leaned forward and asked. Amara, many of us have seen the viral post where you mentioned your husband insulted you in front of his friends. Would you be comfortable telling us what happened? Amara took a deep breath. She looked into the camera. Somewhere out there, she knew Chuka would be watching. And that was fine. Some months after our wedding, she began, my husband started changing. He no longer looked at me like he used to. One night, we attended a party with his friends. I wore a black dress. I had done my hair. I was happy to be out. I thought we were reconnecting. She paused. The room was silent. But when I walked up to the group, one of his friends said, "Ah Chuka, your wife Day enjoy oh. She's glowing." And do you know what he said? Naza leaned forward. Amara's voice lowered. He said, glowing ko. This one. She's just a fat elephant that won't stop eating. Gasps spread through the studio. I stood there. In front of everyone. No one said anything. I laughed a little, hoping it was a joke. But he didn't even look at me. He was serious. I didn't cry that night. But something inside me died. The audience was stunned. Even Naza took a moment to gather her words. I am so sorry, she finally said. Amara nodded slowly. I used to think I was the problem. Maybe if I ate less. Or dressed better. Or became invisible. But that's the danger. When you love someone who doesn't love you back, you start breaking yourself into smaller pieces just to fit into their shrinking love. The audience began to clap. Slowly. Then stronger. Some stood again. What changed? Naza asked. How did you start healing? Amara smiled gently. I started seeing myself the way I wanted to be seen. I stopped waiting for permission to be beautiful. Naza wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Amara continued. There are many women like me. We are taught to keep quiet, to endure. But love should not humiliate. Love should never make you feel like you are too much or not enough. I speak because someone else is still silent. It was a moment. Raw. Real. Powerful. And by the time the interview ended, Amara had become more than a story, she had become a movement. Back at home, Chuka sat on the edge of the couch, frozen. He had watched the entire interview. Every word. Every expression. The phone rang, again. It was his boss. He ignored it. His architecture firm had already sent him a warning earlier that week. Keep your name out of bad press, the message had said. His mother had called him 4 times that morning. One of his clients had withdrawn a project. We want someone with more stable home values, they had said. His world was cracking. But what terrified him more was the truth that slapped him in the face. Amara no longer needed him. Not for love. Not for identity. Not even for peace. She was becoming something bigger than his opinion of her. And for the first time since he met her, he was scared of losing her. He stood up, pacing. Should he call her? Apologize? Try to fix things? No, he told himself. She's just enjoying her moment. She'll come back. But even as he tried to convince himself, he felt a deep chill creep down his spine. Because deep down, Chuka knew. This time, Amara was not coming back to beg. She was rising to lead. And the whole city had her back. The next morning, Amara woke up to find her phone flooded with messages. Some were from strangers. You are a queen, Amara. I cried watching you last night. Thank you for speaking up. Because of you, I've decided to leave a toxic relationship. Others were from old classmates, cousins she hadn't spoken to in years, even teachers who remembered her as the shy, quiet girl who always wore oversized sweaters in school to hide her body. It was overwhelming. She scrolled slowly through the texts, her eyes watery but smiling. Her phone buzzed again, this time, it was a call from an unknown number. She hesitated. Usually, she wouldn't answer. But something in her chest told her to pick up. Hello. A soft, shaky voice answered, Amara, is this you? Yes. Who is this? It's Ngozi. From Abusa Street. Your neighbor. Long time. Amara blinked in surprise. Ngozi was the older woman who had lived in their old compound when Amara was about 15. She had moved away years ago. Oh my God. Auntie Ngozi. Yes, my dear. I saw your interview. And something told me to reach out. I found something. It belongs to your mother. Amara's heart skipped. My mother. Yes. A letter. She gave it to me before she died. She told me to give it to you when the time was right. I didn't understand then. But now, after seeing you, I believe this is the right time. Amara's voice shook. Where are you? I'm back in Udena. Moved last month to care for my sister. I'll be at St. Agnes Market today. Can you meet me at noon? Amara whispered, yes. Yes, I'll come. The market was busy as always. People shouting prices, sellers fighting for customers, the thick smell of roasted corn and dried fish mixing in the air. But all of that faded when Amara saw Ngozi sitting on a wooden stool near the mango cellar. She looked older now. Thinner. Wiser. Her eyes lit up when she saw Amara. My dear girl, she said, hugging her tightly. You still smell like that sweet powder you used to wear, Amara laughed through tears. Ngozi smiled and dug into her handbag. Here. She handed Amara an envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with old wax. It had her name written on it in her mother's elegant handwriting. Amara Nkem Chuka. Only open when your heart remembers who you are. Her hands trembled. She opened it slowly, carefully. The paper inside was soft and creased, but still strong. Her mother's voice came alive through the words. My dearest daughter. If you are reading this, then you are no longer the little girl with braided hair who used to dance in the rain. You are a woman now. A woman who may have already faced a world that doesn't always know how to love you. I know people have tried to shrink you. I saw it even when you were 10. Boys in school mocking your arms. Aunties telling you to eat less, to wear black, to try to be small. I hated it. But I didn't always know how to fight it. I am sorry for the times I was silent when I should have spoken up. I too was once a girl with dreams crushed by a man who loved only how I looked, never who I was. That man was your father. He called me a burden. Said I was too much, too loud, too emotional, too fat. So one day, I left. And I built a world for you with the little I had. But I always knew, one day, you might meet someone like him. Someone who will try to make you believe that love is earned by weight loss or silence. But you must remember. Love does not weigh you. It sees you. It holds you in truth. You are more than your body. More than your pain. You are fire and breath and sky. Don't let the world shrink you, Amara. Rise. Even if your voice shakes. I love you forever. Mama. Amara couldn't stop the tears. Right there, under the shade of the mango stall, she wept, not because she was weak, but because for the first time in years, she felt seen. Ngozi placed a hand on her shoulder. Your mother was a strong woman. Just like you. I forgot her voice, Amara said, holding the letter to her chest. But now I remember. That night, Amara framed the letter and placed it on her bedroom wall. And something shifted in her. She didn't just want to speak up anymore. She wanted to teach. To build safe spaces for women like her mother. Like herself. And that was the day she picked up her old journal and wrote the first line of her new book. They called me fat, slow, unworthy. But I rose anyway. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that I could. Outside, the city of Udena was buzzing. But inside her apartment, something brighter than the city lights was blooming. Amara's purpose. And little did Chuka know, that very purpose was about to shake everything he thought he controlled. Saturday evening in Udena was always buzzing, but that night was something else. Big cars lined the streets, laughter filled the air, and perfume mixed with the smoke from grilled suya as music blasted from the luxury mansion of one of Chuka's rich friends. It was a birthday party, for Lady, Chuka's business partner and show-off. Everything about the event screamed wealth, the golden chandeliers, the men in tailored agbatas, the women in sleek gowns and heavy makeup, holding champagne like it was air. Chuka was there, of course. Wearing his new designer suit. Flashing his fake smile. Moving through the crowd like he owned the place. And walking beside him, like a forgotten handbag, was Amara. She hadn't wanted to go. Not after everything. But Chuka insisted. He didn't say it kindly. He had said, "You've embarrassed me enough. People are starting to whisper that I'm ashamed of you. Come tonight. Look decent. Don't eat too much. And for God's sake, don't speak unless spoken to." His words pierced like knives, but Amara had nodded. What he didn't know was, she wasn't coming to please him. She was coming to watch. To listen. To understand. And maybe, just maybe, to fight back. When they arrived at the party, the energy shifted. People turned. Some whispered. Others laughed behind cocktails. She's the one, right? Chuka's wife. He used to bring slim, fine girls. What happened? Amara heard it all. She didn't flinch. Instead, she wore a royal blue gown that hugged her curves beautifully. Her hair was in soft waves. Her lips glowed wine red. Her confidence. Quiet but burning. She may have entered the party on Chuka's arm, but she was no longer hiding in his shadow. An hour in, the drinks flowed freely. Chuka, already tipsy, was surrounded by his boys, guys he used to party with before marriage. They were loud, laughing, poking fun at each other. And then, it happened. One of the men, a short, smug guy named Ken, said, "Chuka. My guy. You used to bring 10 girls to this place. What happened now? You married an elephant or what?" The men burst into laughter. Instead of defending her, Chuka laughed too. Not just a chuckle. A full, roaring laugh. Then he said it. Loud. In front of everyone. She is a fat elephant, bro. But you know how it is. You marry for peace, not for pleasure. Silence fell for a second. Then the laughter exploded again. The kind of laughter that burns through your skin. Amara stood nearby, frozen. She had heard many things in her life. But not this. Her ears rang. Her cheeks flushed. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was spinning. But then something inside her snapped. And she walked forward. Slowly. Gracefully. Until she stood in the middle of the circle, face to face with Chuka. The men stopped laughing. Chuka turned, surprised. Amara. She raised her hand. Don't speak. Everyone watched. She turned to the crowd. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with each word. I know what you see when you look at me. You see fat. You see failure. You see someone who doesn't belong here. But let me tell you something, what you don't see is what matters. She pointed at Chuka. You see this man? He courted me like a prince. Sang songs to me. Wrote letters. Made me believe love could live in someone like me. And I gave him everything. My time. My care. My soul. She took a step forward. But what did I get in return? Shame. Mockery. And now, betrayal. Her eyes filled with tears, but they did not fall. I used to think silence was strength. But silence is how abusers win. Today, I refuse to be silent. Then she turned to the crowd again. To every woman here who's ever been told her worth is based on her waist size, you deserve better. Your body is not a joke. Your soul is not a punchline. And your pain is not entertainment. The room was dead quiet. People looked away. Some women nodded, lips pressed tight. Amara smiled sadly and walked away. Chuka tried to grab her arm, but she pulled back. Don't touch me, she said. Not after tonight. Then, in front of everyone, she reached into her purse, pulled out her wedding ring, and dropped it into his glass of wine. Clink. She didn't look back. She walked out into the night air of Udena, heart pounding, chest lifted high. The wind blew gently. The city lights twinkled. And in her heart, something new had bloomed. Not pain. Power. Back inside, Chuka stood like a fool, wet with wine and shame. His friends avoided his eyes. And slowly, the whispers began. She's brave, Shah. That man disgraced himself. Man, I respect her. Did you see the way she left like a queen? That night, Amara didn't cry. She wrote. She wrote for hours. Pages and pages. Not just about what had happened, but what was possible. Because Amara wasn't just telling her story anymore. She was becoming a voice for thousands of women. And the city of Udena. It was about to feel her impact in ways no one could have predicted. The next morning in Udena started like any other, horns blaring, street sellers shouting prices, and taxis zooming past, but inside the city's social media circles, everything was different. Because overnight, something unexpected happened. Someone, no one knew who, had recorded Amara's speech at the party. Not the whole party. Just the part where she stood tall, called Chuka out, and walked away like a queen. The video had been posted anonymously to X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok with the caption. She stood up to her husband who called her a fat elephant. This is what courage looks like. Within hours, it exploded. Hundreds of shares. Thousands of comments. Likes piling up like a storm. By 10 a.m., bloggers were already posting headlines. Udena woman confronts husband's public humiliation with class. Queen energy, watch how this woman shuts down body shaming like a boss. Fat elephant. Wait till you hear what she said next. And Amara? She was still asleep. When she finally woke up around 10:30 a.m., in her small but peaceful apartment, yes, she had packed a small bag and left Chuka's house that same night, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls. Messages. DMs, notifications from people she didn't even know. She blinked, confused, and tapped the screen. Her jaw dropped. There were over 200 unread messages. A blogger had already emailed her, asking for an exclusive interview. Women from all over the city, some even outside Udena, were sending messages like, "You are so brave, Amara. Thank you. You spoke what so many of us feel. I cried watching you. I left my toxic husband 2 years ago and this made me feel seen. We need more women like you." She scrolled, stunned. Then came the first voice note, from her younger sister, Ada. "Amara. You are trending. Oh my God, you're all over TikTok. I watched the video 5 times. I am so proud of you. I'm crying." Tears gathered in Amara's eyes. Not from pain this time. From relief. From validation. For years, she had felt small, quiet, invisible. But one moment of courage, one painful, fiery moment, had flipped everything. Meanwhile, Chuka's phone was also blowing up. But his notifications weren't praises. They were shame. "Bro, not cool. That was your wife, man. You messed up. She deserves better. You're trending, and not in a good way." He slammed his phone down on the table. Pacing in his living room, still wearing yesterday's shirt, Chuka was red with anger. Not because he felt bad, but because he was embarrassed. He didn't expect this. He thought people would laugh. Join him. Make her the butt of a joke. But instead, Amara had become a symbol. A movement. His mother called him, her voice furious. "So this is how you treat a woman? Eh? A woman who loved you. You called her an elephant. Publicly. You're no son of mine." His uncles were calling too. His company's board was asking for a chat. Even his pastor sent a short but deadly message. God hates pride. And abuse. May God humble you. Chuka's confidence cracked. For the first time in his arrogant life, he was starting to feel the sting of public shame. Back in Amara's small apartment, she sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by notebooks and her laptop. She was thinking. Not about Chuka anymore. But about what to do next. She replayed the video. Watched herself standing tall. Heard the strength in her voice. And she thought, maybe I'm not just a wife who was shamed. Maybe I'm something more now. She opened her laptop. Created a new account. At Amara Speaks. Then she wrote her first post. They called me a fat elephant. I walked away with my dignity. And now, I speak for every woman who has ever been silenced. You are not too big. You are not too small. You are not too quiet. You are enough. Let's rise together. She hit post. Within 5 minutes, 200 likes. 10 minutes, people were tagging friends. 30 minutes, women were sharing their own stories in the comments. A nurse in Enugu. A single mom in Ikeja. A plus-size fashion designer in Port Harcourt. Each story different, but the pain was the same. And Amara read every one of them. She wasn't alone anymore. She was part of something. She was leading something. Later that afternoon, she received a text from an unknown number. Hi Amara. My name is Ifeoma. I run a women's wellness foundation here in Udena. We saw your video and we'd love to invite you to speak at our upcoming Women of Worth conference. You're exactly the voice we've been waiting for. Amara stared at the message. Was this really her life now? She looked out the window at the busy city street. The noise. The movement. The life. Then she smiled. It had taken one painful night. One moment of public shame. One ring dropped into a wine glass. But from the ashes of her heartbreak, a new Amara had been born. And this time, she was unstoppable. It had been 3 days since the video went viral, but for Amara, everything still felt unreal. The streets of Udena now held a different kind of noise for her, not from buses or impatient car horns, but from whispers. People had begun recognizing her at the supermarket, at the pharmacy, even while walking down the street. Some stared. Some smiled. Others nodded in quiet respect. She had gone from a quiet housewife to a quiet revolution. But even in all this chaos, one question haunted her. Why had Chuka changed? He wasn't always cruel. The men she first met, the men who held her hand in church, who brought her mango slices during her periods, who called her queen every night, where had that man gone? What had broken him? She needed answers. Not because she still loved him, but because she needed closure. So on the fifth evening, after a full day replying to messages from women across the city, Amara wore a simple long dress, tied her scarf over her curly hair, and took a cab to their old house, his house now. She didn't call. She didn't warn him. She just walked up to the door and knocked. Chuka opened the door. His eyes were tired. Red. His beard grown out. He looked like a man who hadn't slept properly in days. He blinked when he saw her. Amara, he breathed, his voice low, uncertain. I need to talk, she said. Calm. Composed. He stepped aside. She entered the house. It still smelled like his cologne, but her presence was gone from the walls. No framed wedding photo. No scented candles. No flowers in the vase. She sat. He sat too. Silence stretched. Then she asked the question. Chuka, why did you change? He looked away. I don't know what you mean, he said. Yes, you do. The Chuka I married was kind. Soft. Loving. But you became someone else. And you never told me why. He clenched his jaw. Things changed. I know they did. I just want to know how. More silence. Then, he sighed. The kind of sigh that seemed to carry years of weight. I didn't know how to tell you. Tell me what? He looked her in the eye. For the first time in weeks, his gaze softened. My mother called me the night after our wedding. She said I made a mistake marrying you. She said I was too handsome to settle for a girl like you. Amara's face froze. She told me people were laughing behind my back, he continued. That I could have done better. Even some of my friends, men I respected, joined her. Said I would regret marrying someone who didn't fit the picture. He paused, swallowing hard. I tried to ignore it. At first. I really did. But every time we went out, I imagined people staring at us. Judging me. Saying, how can someone like Chuka end up with her? A pain like burning oil spread across Amara's chest. He looked ashamed. I let their words eat into my mind. And instead of protecting you, I joined them. I laughed at the jokes. I repeated them. I made you the joke so I wouldn't be one. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. Instead, she asked, so when you called me a fat elephant, that was you protecting your ego? He nodded slowly, broken. I hated myself the moment I said it. But I hated you too, because you reminded me of how weak I was. How much power I gave them. Amara stood. Her voice firm. You didn't just hurt me, Chuka. You betrayed me. I know, he whispered. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm sorry. She shook her head. This isn't about forgiveness. This is about truth. And you finally told it. Then she walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back one last time. You didn't just lose a wife, Chuka. You lost the only person who saw the best in you. And you let the world convince you I wasn't enough. But look at me now. She smiled. I'm more than enough. And with that, she walked out. That night, Amara sat by her window, watching the traffic lights blink across the city. Her heart was lighter. Not healed, but lighter. And her mind was clearer than it had been in months. She had something now she never had before. Power. Not power over others, but over herself. Over her story. Over her future. Over her voice. She opened her laptop and began typing a blog post titled, When They Say You're Not Enough, Remember This. It began with, They told me I was too big to be loved. But the truth is, their hearts were too small to understand love. She wrote for hours, pouring out every buried wound, every silenced scream, every insult she had swallowed. By morning, her post had reached 10,000 views. And in a city full of noise, a city that once tried to shrink her, Amara's voice had become unmissable. Amara never planned to start a movement. She had only wanted to breathe. To heal. To stop feeling like she was shrinking just to fit into the small cage the world had built for her. But by the next week, her blog had over 300,000 readers. Her inbox overflowing. Messages came in from women across Udena, and even beyond. Some were short and raw. Amara, your story is my story. Thank you. Others were long, heavy with grief and pain. My husband told me I disgusted him after our second child. He hasn't touched me in 3 years. But reading what you wrote made me feel human again. And then, the comments started coming in from men too. I used to think the way your ex did. Now I'm ashamed. Thank you for opening my eyes. What started as one woman's heartbreak had become a mirror, and people all across the city were being forced to look at themselves. But the true turning point came when a popular journalist, NSE Udoka, featured Amara's story on her evening show, City Voices. NSE read an excerpt of Amara's blog out loud on national TV. They said my hips were too wide, my arms too round, my belly too soft. But I gave life. I gave love. I gave grace. And for that, I'll never apologize again. The entire city was watching. By the next morning, Amara's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Women were asking, begging, for her to do something more. And then came the idea. A march. Not just any march. Not about politics. Not about any party or slogan. It would be a march of voices. Of visibility. Of women, fat, skinny, old, young, divorced, married, abused, healed, silenced, outspoken, coming together to say, we will no longer be small to make others feel big. At first, Amara was hesitant. I'm not a leader, she told her friend Ngozi. But Ngozi smiled and said, you already are. You just didn't plan it. Preparation for the storm. By Saturday afternoon, Amara was sitting at the small cafe downtown, surrounded by 10 women from different walks of life. Ngozi was there, of course, fierce as ever, pen always ready. Beside her sat Teo, a lawyer who had been body-shamed on her wedding day and dumped 6 months later. Then there was Zainab, a former model who had been forced out of the fashion industry after gaining weight due to a health condition. Each woman brought her story. And with those stories came fire. They started planning. Permits. Routes. Banners. Messages. The march was set for 2 weeks later, on the wide streets of Unity Square, one of Udena's most central and symbolic spots. They called it the Women's March of Enough. Whispers in the shadows. But not everyone was happy. As the posters went up, the hashtags spread, and the media kept reporting, certain powerful men in Udena began to panic. And one of them was Chuka. He had gone from a man praised for marrying a humble woman to being the villain of a national discussion. Everywhere he turned, someone was watching him with disgust. The boys at the gym whispered behind his back. His clients canceled meetings. Even his mother, who had once cheered his insults, now refused to take his calls. He sat in his apartment, scrolling through news articles, clenching his fists. This is all because of her. Then his eyes fell on the march flyer. And that's when the idea struck him. A cruel, selfish idea. The night before the march, Amara didn't sleep. Her nerves were fireflies in her stomach. She had never stood in front of a crowd before. She had never led anything in her life. But tomorrow, she would be standing before thousands. Ngozi had told her the number of people registered to come, over 5,000. Women and allies from every corner of the city were showing up. Because you stood up first, Ngozi said. Amara looked in the mirror. She wore a long mustard dress that flowed like sunlight. No corset. No shapewear. Just her. Full. Beautiful. Free. She whispered to herself, they will not shrink me again. But across the city, as the sun set and a storm brewed in the distance. Chuka was making his own plans. The march begins. The next morning, Unity Square overflowed with color and life. Women carried signs that read, "My body. My story. My power. Not your joke. This body birthed generations, respect it." Amara walked up to the podium they'd built. Cameras flashed. News stations rolled live. Drones hovered. She took a deep breath. And just as she opened her mouth to speak, a loud voice cut through the microphone system. "Before you listen to her, let me tell you who she really is." The crowd turned. Chuka had somehow taken hold of a secondary mic nearby. He stood tall, eyes blazing with bitter pride. "This woman you're all cheering for? She's not a hero. She's a liar. She ruined our marriage with her laziness and her refusal to change. She let herself go. I did what any man would do." Gasps rippled through the square. But Amara didn't flinch. She stepped forward, took the mic again, looked him straight in the eye and said, "You're right, Chuka. I changed. I changed from a woman who begged for love, to a woman who finally learned to love herself." The crowd roared. Amara continued, "And if loving myself makes me a villain in your story, then so be it. But in mine, I'm the hero. And today, I'm not alone." Hands lifted. Voices rose. Women wept. Daughters clapped. Mothers smiled. And Chuka? He stood frozen. Powerless. Exposed. Because for the first time, he wasn't in control. The crowd's roar still echoed in Amara's ears as she stepped down from the podium. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a strange mix of relief and strength she had never known before. Around her, thousands of faces reflected hope, pain, and fierce determination. They weren't just strangers. They were sisters, warriors, survivors. Chuka, on the other hand, looked small and defeated, like a man stripped bare in the harshest winter. But Amara didn't feel triumph. Not yet. She knew this was only the beginning. Days after the march, the city of Udena seemed to hold its breath. Newspapers and TV stations ran endless stories about the Women's March of Enough and the shocking showdown between Amara and Chuka. Some people cheered her courage. Others whispered that she was trouble. At home, Amara's phone kept ringing. Some calls brought words of encouragement. Others were cold, judgmental. But there was one call that made her freeze. A soft voice she hadn't heard in years. The unexpected call. "Amara. It's Ikenna." Ikenna. Her childhood best friend. They hadn't spoken since Amara's wedding. She swallowed hard. "Ikenna, it's been a long time." "I know," he said gently. "I saw what you did at the march. You were incredible." Amara blinked back tears. "Thank you." There was a pause. "I've been meaning to call for a while. I'm proud of you." That simple sentence felt like a warm sunrise breaking through a long night. "Can we meet?" Ikenna asked. Amara nodded, even though he couldn't see her. Yes. 2 days later, they met at the quiet little cafe where Amara often wrote her blog posts. Ikenna was the same, tall, calm, with eyes that held kindness. They talked about everything, her pain, his struggles, and the city that seemed to be changing around them. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. "And you never were." For the first time in a long time, Amara smiled without hesitation. But shadows still lurk. Meanwhile, Chuka's bitterness grew. He lost clients. His reputation was in ruins. One night, alone in his dark apartment, he stared at the city skyline through the window. "I lost her," he whispered. "Because I was blind." But pride stopped him from reaching out. Instead, he made a plan to take back what he believed was his. Amara threw herself into her work with the movement. She organized support groups, workshops, and even began collaborating with doctors and counselors to help women heal, body and soul. Her blog exploded with stories from women who found courage in her words. But every night, she wondered if peace would ever come. Would Chuka leave her alone? Would the city finally accept her? And the hardest question of all. Could she learn to love herself fully, without waiting for anyone else? One afternoon, as Amara sorted through her mail, she found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a note, written in shaky handwriting. I was wrong. I see now what I lost. If you can find it in your heart, meet me at the old park bench on Elm Street. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Amara's hands trembled. Was it from Chuka? Or someone else? Was it a trap? Or a chance for healing? Amara stared at the note in her hands long after the sun had dipped below the city skyline. The words echoed in her mind, if you can find it in your heart, meet me at the old park bench on Elm Street. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Her heart pounded. Memories flooded back like an unstoppable tide. The first time she had met Chuka, the way he smiled at her as if she was the only woman in the world. The promises whispered in the quiet of their wedding night. The cruel words he had thrown like knives in front of his friends, breaking her in ways she never thought possible. But now, after everything, why did she feel a flicker of something, hope? Or fear? She paced the small living room of their old apartment, the city noises humming through the thin walls. She thought about what her friends had said. Don't go alone. It could be a trap. You deserve better. But there was something inside Amara that whispered, you need to know. The next evening, the air was crisp with a slight breeze that carried the scent of blooming jasmine from nearby gardens. Amara wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and stepped out into the city that had both crushed and shaped her. Elm Street was quieter than the rest of the city, lined with towering sycamore trees that swayed gently, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. She reached the old park bench. It was the same bench where they had shared their first real conversation, about dreams, fears, and the future that once seemed so bright. But tonight, it was empty. Amara sat down, her hands folded in her lap. The city lights flickered on around her like distant stars. Minutes later, footsteps echoed softly on the cracked pavement. Chuka emerged from the shadows, his tall figure silhouetted against the streetlights. His face looked different, older, worn by regret and sleepless nights. The arrogance was gone. Now there was only a man stripped of pride, carrying the weight of his mistakes. Amara, he said quietly, voice trembling. She looked at him, searching for the man she once loved, and the stranger who had hurt her deeply. What do you want, Chuka? Her voice was steady but guarded. He took a hesitant step forward. To apologize. To explain. And to ask, if there's any way to make things right. Amara's eyes filled with tears. You humiliated me. You made me feel worthless. How do you make that right? Chuka swallowed hard, the words catching in his throat. I was scared of how much I loved you, scared that I couldn't be the man you deserved. So I ran from it, from us. But hurting you was the worst mistake of my life. Amara's heart cracked open. The pain was still there, raw and fresh, but beneath it, a small seed of understanding began to grow. You don't get to erase what happened, she said softly. But I'm willing to listen. For the first time in months, they talked, really talked, about their fears, their failures, and the dreams they once shared. As the clock in the distant church tower struck 7, they stood up from the bench. Maybe we can try, Chuka whispered. Amara looked up at the night sky, full of endless possibilities. Maybe, she said. But this time, things have to be different. She turned and walked away, her steps light but sure. Behind her, Chuka watched, knowing he had a long road ahead, a road not just to win her back, but to become the man worthy of her love.
The city was waking up slowly when Amara returned home from the park bench. The streets hummed with life, vendors setting up stalls, taxi horns blaring, and the distant sound of children's laughter weaving through the morning air. Yet inside her apartment, silence ruled. She dropped her bag by the door and sank into the worn armchair, the evening's encounter replaying in her mind like an old film, familiar scenes, but with a new script. The way Chuka had looked, vulnerable, sincere, stripped of arrogance. The trembling in his voice when he admitted his mistakes. A part of her wanted to believe, but another screamed caution. She wrapped her arms around herself. Is it possible for a man to truly change? She whispered to the empty room. The days that followed blurred together. Amara found herself walking the busy city streets more than usual, watching life unfold around her, the hurried businessmen, the street artists painting colorful murals, the mothers coaxing their children to school. Amid all this, her own heart waged a war. She began to write again, filling her blog with stories of pain, hope, and healing. Her readers wrote back, sharing their own battles and triumphs, and in this shared vulnerability, Amara found unexpected strength. But every night, Chuka's words haunted her. She knew if she wanted closure or a chance at something new, she had to confront the past and herself. One evening, as the city's neon lights flickered on, Amara received a message. "Can we meet? I want to show you I'm serious." Chuka. Curious and cautious, she agreed. They met at a small community center in a quieter part of town, one Amara had often visited to help organize workshops for women. Chuka arrived early, holding a folder of papers, health plans, support groups, even a personal journal he had started to understand himself better. "I've been seeing a counselor," he said quietly. "Trying to fix what's broken inside me. Not just for you but for me." Amara looked down, surprised. "This is more than I expected." Over the next few weeks, their meetings became more frequent. Chuka showed up to support group sessions, listening more than speaking. Amara noticed his genuine effort, the small but meaningful changes in how he treated her and others around them. Yet, every step forward was shadowed by old wounds. Sometimes, anger would flare between them, other times, silence stretched too long. One night, as rain poured outside, Amara asked, "Why now? Why fight for us after all this pain?" Chuka took her hands in his. "Because losing you made me see who I really was. I want to be better, for you, for me, for the life we could still have." Word spread through the city about Amara's courage, and the couple's fragile journey toward healing. Some admired her bravery, others whispered about second chances and broken promises. But Amara was learning to listen to her own heart, not the city's gossip. As she stood on the balcony overlooking the glowing skyline, she whispered to the night, "Maybe love isn't perfect. Maybe it's messy and hard. But maybe it's still worth fighting for."
The city's relentless rhythm pulsed through the streets, indifferent to the turmoil in Amara's heart. Each day, the skyline shimmered with the promise of new beginnings, yet shadows from the past clung tightly, threatening to unravel the fragile peace she and Chuka were trying to build. That morning, Amara sat at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring through the windows, illuminating the little notebook she kept hidden in her drawer. Inside, she had started writing letters, not to send, but to release the heavy weight inside her. She flipped to the latest entry, "Dear Chuka, I want to believe you. But how do I know this isn't just words? How do I trust again after the pain?" Before she could close the notebook, her phone buzzed. A message from Chuka, "Meet me tonight. I have something to show you." Her heart quickened, a mix of hope and fear swirling inside. That evening, the city was draped in twilight, the streetlights casting pools of gold on rain-slicked sidewalks. Amara found herself walking toward the old community center where they had met before. This time, however, the building was hosting an event, one Chuka had invited her to without much explanation. Inside, the room was buzzing softly with people. Local artists displayed their work, small groups mingled, and the aroma of fresh coffee filled the air. Chuka was there, waiting, a nervous smile on his face. "I wanted you to see this," he said, guiding her toward a wall filled with photographs, images of the city, of people helping each other, of hope and resilience. "This is my new project," he explained. "I'm volunteering to document the stories of people who've overcome hardship. I want to give back to the city that raised me, and maybe, heal myself in the process." Amara was touched. The man who once called her a fat elephant in front of his friends was trying, truly trying, to change, to make amends not just to her, but to himself and their community. Yet, as the evening unfolded, old doubts crept in. Later that night, alone in her apartment, she found herself questioning everything again. Was this really a new beginning or just another act in a long play of excuses? The city outside her window was alive, but inside, a storm raged. Days passed, and their fragile bond was tested by small but painful moments. Chuka's impatience would flare unexpectedly, and Amara's own insecurities made her withdraw. One afternoon, during a heated argument sparked by a missed appointment, Chuka's frustration spilled over. "I'm trying, Amara. But sometimes, it feels like I'm fighting alone." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Because you are. You pushed me away. You made me feel small." In that moment, they saw each other, not as enemies but as two wounded souls desperately trying to connect. That night, Amara sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. She realized that healing wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, takes time to mend. But maybe, just maybe, love could still find a way. She opened her notebook again and wrote, "Today, I choose to try. Not because I'm sure, but because I'm hopeful. Because I want to believe in us, imperfect, broken, but real." The city never truly sleeps. Even as the bright neon lights faded into the early dawn, whispers of old secrets lingered in the narrow alleys and crowded marketplaces. For Amara and Chuka, these shadows weren't just the cities, they were memories, regrets, and fears that threatened to swallow their fragile hope. One rainy afternoon, just as Amara stepped out of a small cafe in the bustling heart of the city, her phone vibrated. It was a call from an unknown number. Hesitating, she answered. "Amara." "It's Nkechi," a voice said cautiously. Nkechi. The name sent a chill through her. Nkechi was Chuka's ex-girlfriend, a woman with a reputation for stirring trouble. Amara's mind raced. Why was she calling now? "I don't want to cause problems," Nkechi said softly. "But you need to know something about Chuka, something from the past." That evening, Amara sat alone in the dim light of her living room, the rain tapping against the windows. She stared at her phone, the conversation replaying in her mind. Nkechi revealed that during the early days of her relationship with Chuka, he had struggled with addiction. It was a secret he'd hidden even from her, fearing judgment. And that sometimes, his worst behaviors came from battles no one saw. Amara's heart ached, not just for Chuka, but for herself. How much of the men she loved was still buried under pain and mistakes? And how much of the past was yet to unravel? The next night, beneath the glittering city skyline, Amara met Chuka at their favorite park bench. The air was thick with tension. "Why didn't you tell me about Nkechi?" "About your past?" she asked, her voice trembling. Chuka looked down, shame flickering in his eyes. "I was afraid you'd leave. I didn't want you to see me as broken." Amara reached for his hand, the pain and love mingling in her touch. "I want to see all of you, all the broken parts too. But you have to be honest." Their conversations grew longer, rawer. They faced the shadows together, confronting old wounds that had festered in silence. But the path was rocky. Some days, Chuka would slip, old habits creeping back in the cracks of his resolve. Other days, Amara's fears clouded her trust. Yet, in the heart of the city that never slept, they kept walking, step by step, moment by moment, toward a love that could survive even the darkest shadows. The city watched them, its noisy streets, its towering buildings, its hopeful hearts. Neighbors began to notice the change in Chuka, the kindness returning to his eyes, the patience growing in his voice. Amara, too, grew stronger, her laughter more frequent, her spirit brighter. But the question lingered, could love born from pain truly heal all wounds? The city was waking up with its usual symphony of sounds, honking cars, vendors calling out their wares, footsteps echoing on the pavement. But for Amara, this morning felt different. The air seemed charged, heavy with possibilities she hadn't dared imagine in months. Amara stood before the mirror in their small apartment, studying her reflection. Her eyes, once clouded by doubt, now held a flicker of determination. The scars of the past, the cruel words, the broken promises, were still there, but they no longer defined her. She tightened the laces of her running shoes and stepped outside into the fresh city air. Today, she was breaking free, not just from the pain Chuka had caused her, but from the self-doubt that had shadowed her since childhood. As she jogged through the city park, the wind whipped her hair and the rhythm of her breath steadied her heartbeat. Each step was a declaration, she would no longer be invisible, no longer a victim of harsh words or broken love. Her phone buzzed, Chuka's name flashing on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "For trying. For fighting. Amara smiled, the distance between them shrinking just a little. But freedom was never without struggle. That afternoon, Chuka received a call that threatened to unravel everything, a voice from his past demanding payment for old debts, a reminder that the shadows he'd tried to outrun still lurked. Fear tightened his chest. He realized that breaking free wasn't just about changing his behavior, it meant facing the consequences of his past actions. In the midst of this chaos, a surprise came. Amara's neighbor, Mrs. Adamu, a wise woman with a reputation for helping those in need, offered support. Everyone deserves a second chance, she told Amara, her eyes kind but firm. But you must also protect your heart. Together, they began to build a plan, one that involved counseling, community support, and small steps toward healing. That evening, under the city's glowing skyline, Amara and Chuka sat together on their tiny balcony. The past was still there, but so was the future, bright and uncertain. I want to believe we can make this work, Amara whispered. Chuka took her hand. We will. One day at a time. The city pulsed with life around Amara and Chuka, but inside their home, an invisible war was raging, a battle no one else could see, yet one that threatened to tear them apart. Days after their talk on the balcony, Amara noticed the change. Chuka became quieter, withdrawn, lost in thoughts that clouded his gaze. He barely touched his meals and often disappeared into his old room, shutting the door behind him. Amara's heart clenched. She wanted to reach out, to break through the silence, but every time she tried, Chuka pushed her away with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. One night, Amara heard the front door slam at midnight. She waited, breath held, as Chuka stumbled in, his clothes smelling faintly of alcohol. Chuka, she whispered, stepping forward, what's going on? He looked at her, torn between anger and shame. I thought I had this under control, Amara. But the cravings, they won't stop. Tears welled up in her eyes. The past had returned, stronger than ever. Amara's strength. Instead of retreating, Amara made a decision. She would stand by him, not as a victim or a punching bag, but as a partner in the fight. The next morning, she called the counselor Mrs. Adamu had recommended and arranged for both of them to attend. At the counseling center, the couple sat side by side, confronting the ghosts of addiction, betrayal, and mistrust. The sessions were painful, filled with tears and harsh truths. Chuka admitted the fear he'd hidden. I was scared of losing you if you knew the real me. Amara's voice was steady but soft. I'm scared too. But if we don't face this, we'll lose everything. Meanwhile, neighbors and friends began to notice the couple's struggle and strength. Some whispered judgments, others offered quiet support. The city's eyes were never far away, but Amara and Chuka chose to focus on the road ahead, no matter how rocky. After a particularly difficult session, Chuka looked at Amara and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "I'm not giving up on us." The city was a patchwork of sounds, children playing in the distance, street vendors shouting, cars roaring by, but inside Amara and Chuka's apartment, there was a fragile stillness, a quiet moment of fragile hope. Healing wasn't a straight road. Some mornings, Amara woke feeling hopeful, believing the worst was behind them. Other days, the weight of everything pressed down on her chest like a stone. Chuka was trying. He attended meetings, stayed home more, and tried to keep promises he'd broken before. But the fight against his addiction was relentless, and the wounds it had left in their relationship ran deep. One afternoon, as Amara was preparing dinner, Chuka's phone buzzed. A message from an old friend, someone still tangled in the world he was trying to leave behind. Amara saw the tension ripple across his face. When he read the message, his hands trembled. He shoved the phone into his pocket without a word. Later that night, after Amara had fallen asleep, Chuka sat alone, wrestling with temptation. The battle was real, and sometimes, it left him bleeding on the inside. Despite her own heartbreak, Amara found strength in the small things, a smile from a passerby, a kind word from Mrs. Adamu, even the warmth of her morning tea. She kept a journal, writing down her fears and hopes, reminding herself why she had said yes to Chuka in the first place. I love the man, not the mistakes, she whispered one night. And I believe we can heal. One evening, Chuka surprised Amara with a quiet dinner. He looked her in the eyes and said, I want to do better. For you. For us. Tears welled up in Amara's eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. This was their turning point, a moment where pain began to soften and the fragile buds of trust started to bloom again. As they moved forward, the city's pulse felt different to Amara, a rhythm of second chances, of battles fought and sometimes won. But deep down, both knew the road ahead was long. There were scars to heal, wounds to nurture, and the ever-present shadow of the past to face. The city lights flickered like distant stars as Amara and Chuka walked hand in hand through the crowded streets. The cool night air wrapped around them, but inside, a storm brewed, quiet yet fierce. Forgiveness was not as simple as a warm embrace or a whispered apology. For Amara, every hurtful word, every night spent alone, every public humiliation was a weight she still carried. For Chuka, it was the guilt gnawing at his soul, the cruel things he said, the ways he'd hurt the woman who loved him most. As they passed a busy cafe, Amara's mind wandered to that terrible night, the one when Chuka called her a fat elephant in front of his friends. The memory hit like a cold splash of water. She remembered the laughter, the shame, the way her heart shattered silently while the world watched. They stopped beneath a street lamp, its pale glow casting long shadows. Amara, Chuka began, voice low and hesitant. I don't expect you to forget what I said. No one should say those things to the person they love. But I want to try, if you'll let me, to make things right. Amara looked up, searching his eyes. There was pain there, but also sincerity. Words cut deeper than swords, she said softly. And sometimes, the wounds don't show on the surface. Over the next few weeks, Amara and Chuka attended therapy sessions, talked late into the night, and faced the uncomfortable truths they'd long avoided. Amara admitted her own fears, the shame she felt about her body, the way the world judged her. Chuka confessed his insecurities, how society's cruel standards made him feel trapped, leading to anger and bitterness. They realized healing wasn't about fixing each other but accepting each other, flaws and all. Meanwhile, gossip began swirling through their neighborhood. Some whispered that their marriage was doomed, others that Amara was foolish to stay. But Amara paid little attention. She had learned that the city's voice was loudest when it tried to tear people down. Her focus was on building something stronger, inside herself and with Chuka. One rainy evening, after a particularly honest conversation, Chuka took Amara's hand and said, I don't deserve you, but I'm grateful you're still here. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she replied, I'm not here because I have to be. I'm here because I choose to be. But this time, on my terms. The first light of dawn spilled over the city skyline, painting the buildings in soft gold. From their apartment window, Amara and Chuka watched the city awaken, a symbol, perhaps, of their own new beginning. Despite the rocky months behind them, there was something fragile but beautiful stirring between them now. The past still whispered its harsh truths, but neither wanted to be prisoners to those shadows any longer. Chuka had started attending support groups regularly, his honesty slowly chipping away at the walls he'd built around himself. Amara, meanwhile, poured her energy into her job and her passion for helping others who struggled with self-worth and heartbreak. But life in the city was never simple. One evening, Amara received a phone call from a neighbor, a kind woman named Mrs. Okeke. Amara, I don't know how to say this, but there's gossip about you and Chuka. Some say you're only staying because of money, others that you'll leave soon. Amara felt a familiar sting. The city's rumors were like wildfire, and no matter how far she and Chuka moved forward, the past still flickered in the whispers. That night, Amara and Chuka sat close on their worn couch, holding hands tightly. We can't control what people say, Chuka said quietly. But we can control what we do, how we love each other. Amara nodded, a calm resolve settling over her. This city might judge us, but it can't break us. Not if we stand together. Chuka looked at her, eyes clear and determined. I promise, Amara, I will never hurt you like before. I will fight for us every single day. She smiled, the weight on her heart lifting slightly. And I promise to love you, all of you, even when it's hard. Outside, the city buzzed with life, endless stories unfolding, secrets kept and revealed. Amara and Chuka's story was far from over. Their love was messy, complicated, and real, just like the city around them. As they leaned into each other, a quiet peace settled, but the future held more challenges, surprises, and maybe even redemption. The city streets glittered under the night sky like scattered jewels, but for Amara, the glitter felt cold, reminders of memories she wanted to forget but couldn't. Shadows of the past clung to her, whispers in the wind carrying old pains and secrets. It started with a knock at the door one rainy evening. Amara opened to find an unfamiliar face, a woman with sharp eyes and a tight smile. "I'm Ngozi," she said. "I used to know Chuka before you." Amara's heart fluttered uneasily. Was this a test? A threat? She invited Ngozi in, wary but curious. Over cups of steaming tea, Ngozi shared tales of a life Amara had never fully known, a past filled with struggles, mistakes, and people Chuka had tried to leave behind. "There were times I thought he'd never change," Ngozi said softly. "But I see the men you've seen now. It's not easy to escape shadows, but maybe love can help." After Ngozi left, Amara sat alone, grappling with a storm of feelings. Could she truly trust Chuka's transformation? Or was this just another chapter in a cycle of pain? Chuka returned home late, exhaustion lining his face. She didn't want to accuse him, but her heart demanded answers. "Who was that?" she asked quietly. "Just someone from my past," he replied. "A reminder of who I was, and who I'm trying to be." The city never slept, and neither did its stories. Every street corner held a secret, every face, a hidden truth. Amara realized that love wasn't just about two people, it was about navigating the tangled web of past and present, truth and lies. That night, Amara made a decision. She would face the shadows, not run from them. For herself, for Chuka, and for the fragile hope that their love could survive. She whispered into the darkness, "We'll fight this together. No matter what comes."